arrangement loses every rationality. Of course, the question then is when the level of unbearable has been reached. So, I mean, you need a criterion to talk about this. Will it be when a people start a revolution? Is this the criterion? So, I still haven't thought about much more about from within Hegel's philosophy how to make this distinction. But if you rephrase the formula in Hegel's terms, this could be a way the Hegelian theory incorporates the potential for revolutionary action and radical change of the system. But I'm very happy to discuss about this very aspect. So let me end my talk with some final critical remarks. So there's one critical remark one could raise, namely asking why not start with abstract right? I mean, I started with a morality chapter, then I went on to ethical life and made this case for revolutionary action in Hegel. But there's abstract right, where the whole theory is getting to start with. So the simple answer is that abstract right makes the institution of private property to be a necessary element of every rational state. But I would say one can argue that this very institution, the institution of private property, exactly is a huge problem for a state's rationality because it creates dependencies, injustice, exploitation, and alienation. But probably the type of theory, so if you think that this is really a problem, then starting with abstract rights would not allow for revolutionary change in the sense that you would try to overcome the institution of private property, because that's the basis, that's the normative basis of every rational state. If you think this is a very problematic basis of a rational state, you cannot start with abstract right. But then you probably, the type of theory probably ceases to be what it is. It ceases to be Hegelian if you cut that part out of it. So this would be the objection to my reading. If you do this, it's not Hegelian anymore, because Hegelian means you start with private property. So I don't think that this necessarily is the case, for two reasons. So the first reason is all arguments Hegel makes in abstract right, I think, can be upheld without private property. Maybe not without property, but without private property. I mean, I think he has a very bad argument for why property needs to be institutionalized in form of private property. So the second reason, this objection only holds if one understands the relation between abstract right, morality, and ethical life as a clear deduction. So it starts with abstract right, and then things are being deduced. And instead, I think one could, and I also think one should understand the relation between abstract right, morality, and ethical life as a form of reflective equilibrium. Even though the norms of abstract right and morality can be understood as normative constraints for ethical life, changes and insights and problematic aspects of ethical life, such as, for example, exploitation, forms of poverty, due to circumstances of capitalist circumstances of private property, might lead to a change of the very normative constraints of abstract right and morality itself. So I think it can go in both directions. And so that is to say that the latter, so the norms of abstract right and morality, do not hold normative priority within the theory. And if you accept this, this objection is not a problem anymore. And okay, I talked almost 30 minutes, and I would say I stop here, and thank you very much for listening.
We have 12 minutes to discuss.
Yeah, thank you. This was great. A quick comment and then a question. The comment is just, I'm not sure that saying that one has a duty to obey the laws is a conservative position. Maybe it is. At any rate, in the United States now, that's the position of the Democratic Party. And the Republican Party's position is you don't like knowledge and you don't have to pay attention to the law. But anyway, that's just a side comment. My question, in a way, is analogous to your final question. You suggest why not start with abstract right? My question is, why not start with civil society, with bürgerliche Gesellschaft? So there's this old insight from Joachim Goethe that bürgerliche Gesellschaft is the French revolutionary principle, made endogenous to the state, internal to the state. And then when Hegel has these lines about how the modern state is able to withstand so much particularity, it's essentially, this is premise 3, right, on page 3, that there is an incorporated revolutionary potential in some way. Now, look, maybe that doesn't seem very revolutionary now, a couple of hundred years later, for some of the reasons you were suggesting with poverty and so on. But I take it part of Hegel's commitment here is logical, and that is there's somewhere where the universal and the particular are unified. That's just logically necessary about social reality. And maybe that's not our current state. Maybe it's something else. But looking for something intra-institutionally, as it were, that played that revolutionary role, like maybe that social movements in the contemporary sociologist sense today. I don't know. Why not start there with something sort of actual as a social revolutionary form?
I mean, right now I don't have any reason against that. I mean, especially the right I was referring to of the morality chapter is an essential part of civil society, plus the private property rights, which are maybe more problematic. Yeah, I mean, I have to think about it. It's not so much hinges on whether I would start with civil society, because I mean, still I would need that part of the morality chapter. It seems to me to be very important, and maybe it's being actualized in civil society. I thought more of not starting with abstract right seemed to me to be more important, because that part entails maybe more problematic aspects that would hinder the system to change in a way where it should go. So, yeah. I mean, thanks also for the comment. I mean, I totally agree. This was pretty quick. I mean, I should maybe look up some passages that are clearly consolidated. Yeah, thanks.
3 more questions. Silvia?
Okay, thank you very much for your talk. It was really interesting. I have just one big question. When you talked about the tension between particularity and universality, it came to my mind the figure of Antigone. And I'm thinking if this is not probably one place where you can look for your research topics to find even this problem of this tension between a particular that needs to convert the universal, as you write here, where the discrepancy between institutional stability and individual particularly reaches a level so unbearable that the institutional arrangement loses every rationality. I think that this is the case of Antigone, and indeed the result is the clash, the destruction of both the universal and the particular. So maybe, what do you think? This could be a nice place where to find the Radbook formula you're trying to put on Hegel and the concept of particularity and universality, or is it totally idea that came to my mind without any sense?
Yeah, I mean, thank you very much. I will have to look up some passages, maybe to find some formulations. I mean, one thing that, I mean, the whole ancient world still, from Hegel's point of view, still not, doesn't have a principle of individual moral subjectivity, which is a very important part of the morality chapter in his mature philosophy of right. And so this might be misleading using the Antigone example to make this more explicit, because the Antigone example, I think, works differently in this concern. But maybe this also gives me the opportunity to add something, because as I understand it, the tension between particularity and universality when it comes to revolutionary change is not just a tension between one individual and the universal. Because I mean, I would say this is not what revolution or revolutionary change or revolutionary action means, because that is already a collective endeavor. So there's already a collective of people who are united via a shared particularity that stands in tension to the universal, which is maybe incorporated in the legal system, for example. So this would also be a difference to the Antigone example.
Yes, but indeed the family has the same connotation of the Antigone, the idea of love or piety. So there can be similarities between the two positions, even if one is about the Greek word and the other we are talking about the Japanese. But maybe in the conjunction between family and Antigone, I think that there is something that can tell us something more about this idea of individualities and particularities. That it was this, maybe I wasn't clear about this connection, because it wasn't clear to me too.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Yeah, that's super helpful. Yeah.
We have really many questions, so I'll ask you to be very brief.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Good talk. I was thinking to the first quotation of paragraph 273, and at the end of the quotation, if I right understood, this could be an argument, so to say, against the revolutionary potential, and at the end it is written, presupposes that the Constitution is already present, and so on, and implies that this change could take place only in a constitutional manner. Okay, but I think the problem here is what a constitution is. I'm not sure that Hegel is here thinking about the constitutional law or something that is simply a law, but he's thinking about the ethical life as that has a constitutional form. And so it seems a little bit obvious to say that a change of the constitution could take place only in a constitutional manner, because it is only in the ethical life, in the forms of life of the ethical, that could emerge something like a revolution, or not.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, I try to refer to both meanings of constitution and Hegel. So just, I mean, the written legal form of a constitution, and then the ethical life, just how people are living and actualize certain forms. I also, yeah, I mean, okay, it's different, because I mean, even if you talk about the constitution in the way of the ethical life, when the question arises to change, then there's already a tension within ethical life, because then at least you have at least two different groups that are not equal anymore in the sense of the way they are constituted, so to speak. So, and if you then say it only can happen in a constitutional manner, the question then is, okay, what counts as the constitution of the people? So, yeah, but yeah, it's a good point. I have to make this explicit.
Okay, thank you very much for the interesting talk. I think if you like to make the case for this revolutionary potential, and it's linked to the previous comment, I think it should be derived, as it were, out of the concept of sittliche Freiheit. I think the tension you brilliantly reconstructed is built into this very concept of sittliche Freiheit, ethics, so it's very practical. Hegel has developed a deep non-instrumental understanding of the state, and there is a twofold negation, and mostly just one side of the negation is taken into consideration. Firstly, the task of this civic Staat is to mediate subjective freedom, which you highlighted, subjective freedom with the common good, universal freedom. And if this is the case, I can live as a citizen in the state in the awareness that I have my freedom, my subjective freedom, within the society, the freedom of the society. This is the one side which is always highlighted. But civic Freiheit also means the other side, conversely, society, according if we take Hegel seriously, society has its very freedom in the freedom of the individual. So it holds that we have to regard it from both sides. And this is, in my understanding, where this is the logical structure, as it were, of the mediation. And if the second side, if we have the tension on the second side, then of course this revolutionary potential is present. So the state is just named its death if it's not recognized as the sphere of realization of my freedom. My freedom in terms of absolute right and morality. Suggestions.
Yeah, thank you very much. I agree that there are the two sides. The question still will be why Hegel did not also, I don't know, write about institutionalized forms, how to change, for example, in case that the universal has not freedom anymore because the individuals lack forms of freedom. So, I mean, this you still
it's
ask
historical experience. I think he would have done that after World War II.
Yeah.
What about this?
Yes, thank you. I thought I would have the time. So thank you for your talk. I think that your notion of revolution, I mean, in your title, is not necessarily the one that Hegel himself used. I think that's your intention. Or maybe I'm wrong, but I understood it like this. So what exactly is your notion of revolution? I mean, it's very well known that many theorists of revolution. Yes, sir. Thank you. They thought about revolution as being connected somehow with violence, for example. And I think that concerning violence, Hegel is very clear in the sense that it is related to the abstract will. So the abstract will is the purely destructive will. And so there, I think it's not clear that it is an idea of revolution that one can find as potential in the philosophy of right. And so why not call it, for example, a reformist potential in your talk?
Yeah. Thank you very much. I mean, this is a really good question. I mean, so if you take violence, the means or the use of violence supposed to be necessary for something to be a revolution, maybe it might be harder to argue from a Hegelian perspective. So one reason is when I distinguished between reform and revolution according to which parts of the system are being changed. And so I thought it might be helpful to still talk about revolution in case the things being changed are the very basic normative fundamentals of a society, whereas reform accepts many things and just changes parts of the system. And that was the reason why I was using this term to make this distinction. I mean, in the end, not so much hinges for me on the term, you know? But I wanted to use the term because the term of revolutionary action or revolution has is closer to meanings of being radical change in opposition to reforms. And when it comes to reform, of course, Hegel is more open to reform. And maybe, this is just an idea, maybe it would also be possible to have a revolution via reform in the sense that you could, I could imagine a process of, let's say, 50 years or 70 years or 100 years of reforms that in the end would have a revolutionary impact in the sense that they go in a direction that in the end would have changed the system very radically, even though just step by step, little reform here, little reform there. And so maybe in the end it's more, maybe it's more about social change, and it's about the degree of which parts of the thing being changed. Yeah, so thank you.
Sorry, we have time for just one more question. No? So, Don?
No, I will just.
Okay, fantastic. So, the last one.
Thank you very much for the lecture. I would perhaps have it would seem a classical Marxist question about it, because we started with private property. You know, for example, there's another theorist, Proudhon, who then wrote, all property is theft, to which Marx replied that this is just nonsense, because there's private property and there's private property. So there's private property of means of production, and there's private property as my private home, my private car, and if you don't clear that, then you have an absolute abstract meaning of property. So perhaps the revolutionary potential, which I think is there in Hegel, is then that this revolutionary potential opens up not between the individuals and the state, but in society itself, between different groups, classes, which Marx is. So then you have your revolutionary potential. And there's, as he said, to connect it to his question, then there's also no reform possible, because it's not about reforming the state. There's a fundamental revolution or a necessarily rupture in society itself, which cannot be fixed in the terms that Hegel thinks. I don't know what your take on this, but the abstract form of profit, of private property, which is the base of Hegel's theory.
I think I didn't quite get the point, but I mean, I would say there's no private property without a state enforcing the right to private property. It's one thing. I thought that Proudhon critique is just meant to say when you say all property is theft, the concept of theft already presupposes an understanding of a system of private property. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. Yeah. So, I mean, my point was actually to say the Hegel, as I understand the Hegelian practical philosophy, not necessarily hinges on the institution of private property to be necessary for a system to be rational. You know, because I was thinking about how to interpret the theory in the sense that it allows for a lot of change potential. But if you, for example, would hold the claim that the abstract right and morality norms are necessary parts of the theory, this would lead to the fact that there might be the possibility of change, but there might not be the possibility of a change in the sense that you change the property institutions. So this is something I would take to be very problematic. I would say, okay, then I would rather go on read just Marx and stop reading Hegel. But I think Hegel's theory is not necessarily bound to the rationality of the institution of private property. So, yeah, I don't know whether we have a
it's
disagreement, but
we'll not take more.
Thank you, Thomas, for your